And that could just be algorithms seeing that at a face value, this article has a lot of interaction from other people this age. So let's feed them that because it'll keep on the platform for a little bit longer.
Oh, that's a good point.
And
So it might not even be a valued opinion. That might even not be a pervasive opinion, but
Yeah.
somebody writing an algorithm says, hey, this keeps people on the page.
Yeah.
Keep throwing them this stuff. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it could be going both ways. Like maybe, I hate to say older people, but I'm falling on a
ageism. They call that ageism.
yeah, ageism. I'm lacking a term off the top of my head, but like it could be the same way for them, that it's an algorithm that's noticing that this post is getting lots of interactions from people of a similar demographic, whether that's either age, location, or whatever. And it keeps feeding them that. And so maybe that's why I keep seeing all these memes of like, millennials nowadays can't even start a lawnmower. I keep saying that just because I've seen that so many times now that it's practically a meme at this point.
But let me ask you this. Are they feeding us those algorithms because that's what people desire to see and what people desire? That's what we're thinking. That's what keeps us on longer. And that speaks to what we think already.
Well, it's kind of the same tactic that media or news media has to use currently because they're a dying company. Like the amount of investment they have in their live TV software and broadcasting and contracts they have with.
Yeah. Did you see where Joe Rogan's views? Did you see this? Where his views on wherever he's platform now is like way more than what Fox News or CNN is getting now. By the way, did you?
Oh, I believe it.
100%.
I didn't know he said anything about that.
Well, I don't know if he said anything about it, but I just seen the the ratings, I guess.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So yeah, that just speaks to the fact that it's yeah.
Well, the strategy they're using, because they are dying, they have to do more desperate acts to get revenue because their means of revenue is getting attention, either by TV or articles or whatever. And the human psyche, I explained this in another clip as well, but I might as well just say it now. And I repeat this because more and more people need to know this. Like, this is how they're getting our attention. The human psyche has a 5 times greater reaction to an equal negative stimuli than a positive stimuli. So the example, you find a random $5. You're happy. You lose $5. You're 5 times more angry about losing that $5 than you are happy about finding $5.
Right.
And of course they've known this. This information's not new information. And so they put out negative articles, negative news all the time because you get such a reaction out of people that eventually that just becomes addicting. That this reaction,
right?
And I think we've heard that before, reaction culture or something.
Yeah,
it's ringing a bell in my head somewhere.
Yeah,
reactionary, whatever. But that's the strategy they're kind of using to keep themselves alive.
So let me ask this: it feels like though, and this goes kind of back to, it feels like young people may be picking up on this to some degree or another. I don't know, because they're so addicted to social media. I say they're so addicted to social media. I would love to see the demographics of people who spend the most time on Facebook, because it feels like Facebook is leaning more now towards the older generation who are just like scrolling through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it seems like I've seen, speaking of these ratings, when I was looking at it, Fox News is outdoing CNN by far right now, but it seems like the values that CNN promulgate are more in line with those of younger generations, and Fox News in line with more older generations. And older generations are people who turn on DirecTV at night, not younger people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they're just sort of, I think younger people are just sort of tired of that that sort of news. I mean, even though you were referring to social media is obviously doing it, but you obviously see this on basic news channels. Am I right about this?
Yeah.
That it's totally negative all the time. Number one, and number two, these subjects are like, I mean, you bring people on to interview them, and it's like a 3-minute interview. Or my favorite is when you have two opposite ends of the people who are quote unquote debating each other, but there's like 3 minutes.
They're just yelling at the same time. There's no articulate conversation.
Yeah,
happening
there's
at all.
no meat there at all. There's no way to come to any sort of objective conclusion or anything like that regarding what they're saying. I think a lot of people, I don't know, I could be wrong. Again, I have nothing to back this up, prove this with, but I think a lot of people seem like they're picking up on this, especially when you look at someone like what Joe Rogan is doing and these 3-hour interviews with people and getting into the quote unquote the nitty gritty with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what people want is genuine
substance.
Yeah, they just like what's the ITY version of genuine? I can't think of it, but they just want genuine people talking. And usually, what people want to learn is not someone who, like, if you want to learn a subject about X, you don't want someone who knows everything about X to teach you about it. You want someone who knows just a little bit more than you about X to teach you it, because they're a lot more relatable to you. They were just in the steps you were in to learn about X.
Yeah,
and so. You see this with a lot of news media. They bring people who are the experts for whatever reason they're called experts. Okay, I gotta take that back because that's rude to say. People who have spent a lot of time learning about a subject.
They are real experts.
They are real experts.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah. They're not God though.
But people in general can't learn from that. They have to be just a few steps or a step behind that person to really learn like their real knowledge of X subject. Versus like the vast majority of people aren't experts on a topic. They're either way behind, knowing nothing, or just 1 or 2 steps into learning about that subject.
So it takes some knowledge to know something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard, what's that graph called? It's the graph of like your knowledge and confidence in a topic.
Right.
I forget Dunning. I don't think it's that.
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. Anyway, well, the graph goes like this. So you have knowledge on your x-axis and confidence in your y-axis. And so as you learn more, you go like this, you hit the peak, and then you come back down as you learn more about it.
Right.
And then your confidence goes up like this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are right here at this peak when it comes to knowledge on politics or science or whatever.
I agree with that.
They have such high confidence. Same, like it gets us all. We all have this false confidence in a lot of topics.
Right.
But the only way you get from here to this high first peak is by learning more.
Right.
And then you realize, I really actually don't know anything.
And the way we're doing things right now with the news media, social media, things like that is not conducive to producing knowledgeable citizens in our country, right?
That's why Joe Rogan can make a 3-hour podcast about one niche topic or a subject to similar subjects versus a news show, an hour news show, who talks about 6 or 7 different things within that hour with 10 different people, having no real substance. But what sells them on it is the anger involved between the two people, the drama. I mean, it's basically reality TV, but serious.
100%. Yeah. And so do you feel like this is going back to what you were talking about in that video, is this like an older generational issue or a younger generational issue, or is this something we deal with both equally? I'm curious kind of where you're going with this.
I feel like it's both. Yeah. So like we both generationally have different issues. Yeah. Because we're all a lot of us younger people, younger millennials and Zoomers, grew up in social media. We don't know a time before social media really. Maybe not necessarily millennials. The youngest millennials, like myself, kind of remember before social media. Yeah. Because being born in 95, social media came around in the late 2000s. I was just a young teenager at that time. And so...
I remember getting on it for the first time. It was very addicting.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so our brains developed in that environment. Yeah. Versus people who are older, Gen X, the baby boomers, their brains developed outside of this. So they're having to react to social media differently than we are. And so since we're both having different, I guess, problems with the same platform or the same technology, I should say, we look down on each other because I understand this part of this technology because I grew up in it. Like, it makes sense to me. Versus older people are like, this part doesn't make sense, but this part makes sense 100% because I understand human interaction a whole lot. Right. And so, I'm not saying that younger people don't have human interaction or older people don't understand technology, but on a broad scale. Yeah.
And you think this is contributing to the divide among younger and older people?
I think so. I can't say I know the whole problem itself.
Right.
I think I have bits and pieces though, and I'm just trying to connect them. But
right. Well, I can't speak to the technology side of things because I don't know much about them. But I will say in the church world, speaking, if we go there, it seems like there is you'll see churches that put on display their mostly white churches put on display their diversity, but there's not a lot of, there are some churches that talk about how they're multi-generational, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of churches, especially in the kind of the church growth movement and the seeker-sensitive, attractional model church movement, I don't know if you know what I mean when I say that, but
I know some of those words.
Yeah, basically churches, well, their philosophies of church models is what I mean. I don't know if you know what they mean, and basically is that you just the extreme. Not all churches are like this, but the extreme is you just put on a show on Sunday morning to attract people, and mostly that show, and mostly churches like that just like want to put on a stage just young people. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, I don't know if that's where you're going with that, but in my opinion, that contributes some. I think young people can get the idea from that sort of church philosophy that there's nothing to learn from older generations, and I think that is a really big mistake. I can't speak of older people. I definitely think that people who are older boomers, like you guys were talking about, definitely look down on younger people talking about not being able to start a lawnmower. I think that's such a horrible philosophy, and you're giving up your responsibility to raise people up and to teach them about life. Why would you run someone in the ground about not knowing how to start a lawnmower? Why don't you teach them how to start a lawnmower?
It makes you feel better about yourself. Like if you can identify part of a problem. I've been saying this for so long, like the people who say you are the problem, that saying that's been going around for the past since 2016, you're a part of the problem. That saying in itself like reveals the idea behind like I see you as the problem and I know I'm not the problem, so I don't have responsibility in fixing the problem. You have the responsibility to fix the problem because you are it. And I'm trying to say this at least as much as I can, that like, no, we're all a part of the problem. All of us need to have responsibility in this. And I think the church likes to, like you said, when we separated from culture, what was that, in the 70s or 80s or something?
Man, I wouldn't even know, but it's been going on for sure.
When I feel like that's kind of where that kind of like that idea of like you're part of the problem, drugs are the problem, or the internet's the problem, or things like that, bad things on the internet are the problem. It's like, yes, they're bad, but it's still the people that are making the decision and the people that are either enabling them to do that or being dismissive to them doing things and not, like you said, engaging the culture and those things.
100%. And it comes down to, I think, and I know this sounds so cliche, but I think it's so true, is like, how can I be a part of the solution? And that's a good question because that comes back to personal responsibility. Yeah. Like what can I do? No, seriously. Like how can you be a part of the solution? Yeah. Because if you just simply pointing out issues, is that leading us to a quote unquote greater good, whatever you think that greater good is in society? Is it? And it's probably not. But I don't know if you've ever heard of G.K. Chesterton, but he was a famous preacher, and there's an interesting story from him. He was asked, there was this, I think it was, I may be getting the story wrong to some degree or another, but there was a news organization or something like that who was sending out questions about, asked all these pastors or priests or whatever, asked them the question, spiritual leaders, what is wrong with the world? I mean, that's such a relevant question today. And a lot of people are answering that question. Everyone has opinion about that question.
Everyone's got an answer for it.
And G.K. Chesterton famously wrote back and said, in response to your question, what is wrong with the world? The only answer that I can give you is that I am what's wrong with the world, right? And that's such a good question. And by the way, it's a distinctively Christian answer to that question, because the doctrine of sin, even though we don't like to talk about that anymore, especially in the speaking of the attractional model church, that comes from, again, this is the extreme, but you think of the TV preachers where they get on TV and just it's about self-motivation and things like that, and very rarely is it talk about sin. Well, the doctrine of sin is very important because the Bible says that you will die in your sins. And the doctrine of sin teaches personal responsibility. So when we teach the doctrine of sin, we can understand that one way, the first way, and the chief way that I can make society a better place is not to start with you, but to start with me. Yeah. Right? And I think that's really important. And I think that's important for every generation to understand, is that I start with me, making me a better person. And then when we become a better person, that comes from what I was just reading today again in Matthew chapter 20 or 21, is that if you want to be great, it starts by serving. Mm-hmm. And so how do you serve the older generation, young people, or how do you serve the younger generation, older people?
Yeah.
Is by taking personal responsibility.